So thanks everyone for joining today's event on the Pause and Reflect session on R&I for WASH activities for RFSAs. And we are really excited to be co-hosting this event with the Titukulane RFSA. And also very happy to have support from the PCS Associate Award. And we have Julia and Kayla on the line for that. Next slide. So before we begin, please go ahead and connect to interpretation, and you can select either English or French. We would also encourage you to add your affiliation, Zoom toolbar, find your name, click helpful if you can rename yourself to include your name and organization or the RFSA that you are working on. Next slide. So we're really excited to see a wide range of participants today from a number of different RFSAs, many of who have completed Refine year or who are currently in their Refine year. During today's Pause and Reflect event, we will be discussing different methods on how can we achieve more sustainable and substantive results for WASH. We will identify some key gaps in tools, capacity, or guidance for RFSAs to design R&I for WASH more effectively. We'll also discuss some points of collaboration with integrated water resource management and identify any future interest you have in collaborating on resources such as a WASH R&I toolkit. Finally, we'll have a breakout room to identify ways to support RFSA staff to own and lead on WASH learning process and decision making. Next slide. So today's session will be really participatory. We will start with opening words from BHA on R&I for WASH. We then will have a panel discussion, and we have Budi Kadidi, Titukulane, Maharo, and USAID who will be on the panel. We'll then take a short break, and we'll come back and have two different breakout rooms. The first one will be on WASH, R&I methods and approaches, and then the second breakout room, you will be able to choose from topics around integration of WASH and IWRM and project staff ownership of WASH and IWRM. We'll then wrap up with some final reflections and next step. And after the event, we'll be sharing out a summary note that will capture all of the different discussions from the panel and from the breakout rooms. And this summary discussion will also help us decide on those next steps on where you want to take this collaborative work on R&I for WASH. Next slide. So I'm really excited now to introduce Kumbukani, who is a program management specialist for nutrition with USAID Bureau for Humanitarian Assistance in Malawi. I will now turn it over for opening words.
Thank you very much, Nicole. Let me start by greeting. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, bonjour, bonsoir. Let me welcome you to this Pause and Reflect for Refine and Implement for WASH, being hosted by Titukulane as well as Pro WASH. Thank you very much for sparing time to join and participate. As you might know, the R&I period is characterized by the 12 months of generating evidence and knowledge gaps. The idea is to make sure that we use these gaps, use the evidence to fill in our theory of change. It provides us an opportunity to address challenges based on the local context. So in our case, we were able to do formative research on WASH. We did analysis, and then we also went to identify the key stakeholders that we work with in terms of WASH. And in the end, we were able to revise our theory of change. Now, the purpose of this Pause and Reflect is to discuss the method for achieving more sustainable focused R&I for WASH. And I'm sure Nicole has already highlighted most of the other issues that we'll be discussing under this Pause and Reflect. With those few remarks, I want to wish you fruitful deliberations and get involved in the whole process. Over.
Great. Thank you so much for opening words. We'll move on now to our panel discussion. On today's panel discussion, we will have USAID, Titikulane, Maharo, and the Budi Kadidi Resilience Food Security Activities. Budi Kadidi, we have Rafa, who is the Health Nutrition WASH Technical Lead from Catholic Relief Services. Budi Kadidi went through the Refine year in 2016 to 2017. And so we're really excited to have this perspective now that a few years has passed since Budi Kadidi completed their Refine year. What lessons and recommendations and ideas can they share with us? From the Titikulane RFSA in Malawi, we have Gift, who is the water manager with the Resilience Food Security Activity at WaterAid. And we also have Peter, who's the head of programs, and Kyla, who is a senior WASH systems advisor with CARE. From Maharo in Madagascar, we have Anjara, who is the sanitation and hygiene specialist, and Kara, who is the strategic learning advisor. And from USAID, we have Kumbukani. And we also have Precious, who's on the line, who's a WASH advisor and ProWASH's activity manager. So before we go into the panel discussion, each of our RFSAs will just present about 5 minutes of their key learnings when it comes to refine and implement for WASH. So I'll turn it over now to Rafa for the first presentation.
Good evening, good afternoon, and good morning, everyone. I'm really happy to share with you a few learnings from the Budi Kadidi project in the DRC, in the Kasai Oriental. Next slide, please. We have basically really done different activities, different studies, but mainly what I pointed here was kind of more in-depth desk and policy reviews, and also stakeholder analysis. We try to identify really the dynamics between different stakeholders and the existing relationship between them, especially in the region, because we have changed region in the middle of the program implementation. The next slides, please. And in addition to that landscape analysis, there was a lot of analysis also on the practices, the knowledge and attitudes. We did the barrier analysis, we did the CAP studies, but mainly we did a lot of community consultation to really assess where are the lessons learned from previous program, what are the advice that Budi Kadidi can get from them, and what are the issues or possible risk that may affect the program, both in the water service delivery, but also on the sanitation aspect. And we did a lot of also of the governance structure and system existing in the communities. And of course, as the bigger program of the RFSA, we did a gender assessment to assess gender equalities and inequalities in the different regions. Next slides. And so, and one particular aspect for WASH is really to assess the current national program infrastructure design, because we have to continue that structure, that type of sanitation technology that the national program was promoting. And since we know exactly where the region we have to work compares to what was written in the proposal, it is clear what are the different raw materials, what are the structure of the soils, who are the different people that can really help on the sanitation infrastructure construction. So we did those kind of very specific, very in-depth analysis of the realities in the region. And so next slide, please. So at the end, all of this information, all of this knowledge of the context has helped us a lot in the overall program, but basically in the WASH, it helped us, if you see the bottom part of the document, the peers, which is the indicator definition of the WASH indicators. It was really important to know what are feasible, what are the existing system that we can complete and can leverage, and it helped us a lot in definition of the indicators. It helped us a lot also on the water service delivery, because there were for sure many infrastructure construction in the area we've been working, and we got lots of advice from those past experience, and it helped us a lot in defining our design of the governance system of those water service, but also the design of our materials, the training manuals, and how the coaching of the water service community-based management. And so, and then there is all the aspect of the design of the social and behavior change, the tools, because we did a lot of barrier analysis. But what I would like to conclude is really the stakeholder engagement. It is really important to know, based on the situation, who could be our allies in the program, what are the entry points for the program, especially for the WASH, and who could really help us on the sustaining in our sustainability plan. So our sustainability plan was based really on the define and implement, and it helped us throughout the program, and we can go in depth of this afterwards during the discussion point. So thank you so much. I'm really happy to share more about the details of the WASH and the refine implement impact on the WASH. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Rafa, and really excited to learn more about the stakeholder engagement and the sustainability plan as well. I'll now turn it over to Gift, who will present on some of the learnings from the Titikulane RFSA in Malawi.
Thank you, Laura, and thank you, everyone. Good morning and good afternoon to you all. I will be sharing with you some learnings from Titikulane in Malawi. By the way, Titikulane is a 5-year RFSA that is implemented in Malawi in the 2 districts of Mangochi and Zomba, the southern part of the country. And we're in our 3rd year of implementation. But I think I will be wanting to, first of all, share with you the full scope of WASH as it appears in the Titikulane design. So what we've done in Titikulane is that we have got 4 ends that WASH is actually responding to in the wider RFSA. First is to actually increase access to safe drinking water to the communities we're serving. And in the R&I, we had actually done a feasibility study that has informed our infrastructure investments, particularly looking at which boreholes we need to rehabilitate and what governance systems would we need to put in place to make sure that the investments that we're putting into the 2 districts do really spend over time. We've also done the supply side assessment of the sanitation chain to really inform our market-based sanitation approaches and strategies in the 2 districts. And we have also done the hygiene formative research, which has actually helped us to really get us to define what hygiene strategies and interventions we employ in the 2 districts to make sure that we improve hygiene behaviors in the communities where we are serving. Now, for purposes of this particular RFSA, we will very much be looking at the water feasibility study that we actually conducted, and we will be sharing with you what were the key findings from that study and what have we managed to do with those findings moving forward. So the water feasibility study was actually built around, 1, helping us to understand what are the general rehabilitation needs for water point, and really to understand context-specific factors that impact functionality of water point in those 2 districts. You may wish to know, if you read research around water access in Malawi, non-functional rates for Malawi water points around 30 to 40%. So we wanted to actually get into the districts to try to find out what is the cause of this high rate of functionality for Mangochi and Zomba. And also wanted to understand what are the capacity management structures and capacities that exist that would actually help us to do the operational maintenance in the 2 districts. And of course, look at what are the barriers that affect women participating in the WASH investment and making profit from the same. So in this slide, which is just before us, I would want just to share with you some of the key findings that we found or we got from the WASH feasibility study, what is the cause of non-functionality of water supply systems, we found out that most often the non-functionality is as a result of either poor siting, and you get into areas where you would perhaps have less than the required yield from the boreholes, from the underground recharge to keep your boreholes running throughout the year. We also have issues where construction quality is infecting functionality of the water points. We found that we have got high levels of contamination because of fecal contamination. We've actually used those findings to agree on the approach that we'll take in terms of what will we do before we do the rehabilitation. So firstly, to really get into technical checks and assessments to actually have the full understanding of what is the cause of the breakdown of a particular borehole before we get into fixing it. And of course, this includes the water quality check so that we know that this water is safe for human consumption and our investment will actually get us the return. And we have actually also gone into expanding the scope of reticulation of water supply systems to make sure that we congest the water facilities, because one area in the areas where we are. We have also engaged the national level Ministry of Water and Sanitation to make sure that we enforce standards for water quality construction and of course water monitoring and surveillance. So we are really getting into working with the national level communities and governments to make sure that we actually get to addressing the key gaps that we found in the WASH feasibility study. We've actually got into using that to actually prepare our strategy in terms of how do we then deliver the service to the communities. And in this and coming slides, we will be discussing more of what we have actually packaged in addressing the key gaps that we actually found with the feasibility study that we had actually conducted. So I'm happy to get into the other breakout rooms and share with you some of the critical things that we found, and of course, how we're actually applying the lessons from the water supply system study that we conducted in the R&I process. Looking forward to meeting you in the breakout rooms. I think we've run out of time and I stop it here. Thank you and over.
Great, thank you so much, Gift, for sharing. And I know these challenges around water point functionality and water quality, are some of the issues that other RFSAs have faced as well. I'd encourage everyone who's on the line to chime in the chat box during the presentations if you have questions, or if there are things that the panelists say that really resonate with you, or maybe a very different experience that you had during Refine. We'd love to hear from you as well. We'll move on to our next presentation from Anjara on the Maharo project and learnings from Madagascar.
Thanks, Nicole. Hi, everyone. My name is Anjara, and the sanitation and hygiene specialist of Maharo project, which has been implemented since 2019 in Madagascar. I'm happy to be here with you on this pause and reflect session about WASH activities. So thank you very much for inviting us to participate in this activity. Our approach was based on a pilot because of the COVID operational research delay, so not international staff to do the studies. Next slide, please. So let's go. As you can see on the slide in the middle, there are two types of learning that we have done for R&I. The first concerns the learnings about the programming, the process, the quality, and the behavior change. And the second concerns learnings according to the context. So what are the lessons learned during the Refine year? Even in the most difficult conditions, such as famine, drought, and water scarcity, communities were able to build and use latrines as they were triggered and empowered in WASH community groups. They have very impressive capacity and know-how that must be valued. The promotion of community models for hygienic latrines has facilitated and use and constrictions for more vulnerable households. So during the implementation, adjustment and adaptation have been made to the quality of community latrines because the GMP criteria are very difficult to achieve given the context of Mahar intervention areas. We have replaced the term of improved by hygienic, which meet the standard requirements. The lack of water does not hinder the construction and use of latrine by household, and the community use TV tap and ash for hand washing after the toilet. Ash is very effective. Also, in eliminating bad smell of latrine. And then each agroecological zone has its type of latrines, depending on the local material available and the type of soils. But the biggest challenge that so far is the latrine model for coastal areas, sandy areas at risk of collapse, because we know the CTS applies the principle of zero subsidies. So we are in the process to finding the solution on this problem. Next slide, please. Then this photo shows that the evolution of community latrine since the CLTS and the ERF implementation. After Trigger, the communities built latrine according to their know-how and skills with the material local available on site. Then they were accompanied to support to improve their latrine, especially for the respect of sanitary requirement that describe the unhygienic latrine, clean, fly-proof, and fenced. From there, they improved their capacity and know-how taking into account the sanitary requirements according to the instructions of our team during the monitoring, review activities, and improve their latrine, which are close to the norm and standard, but made with the local materials available, as we can see on the slide. The photo with the little girl holding something in her hand is an indication for acceptability of the behavior promoted by community. They defecate in the nature, but secure the areas and fecate and feces in a well-covered and firm hole. Of course, CLTS is a community process that follows the rhythm of communities and also influenced by the context. So currently, SPC strategies are being developed to promote behavior change and use of latrines within the community through the negotiation to small to hard action. To summarize, each community has its own response to behavior that the project promotes. Others are very diligent and accept easily, and others need a little more time to react. The changes are not the same. The advantage of the pilot activity for learning during the refining year is that we obtain several pieces of information simultaneously and even result without waiting 3 or 4 months or more as for a study. So I believe that that's all. Thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Angera, for your presentation. I see some great questions coming in. We'll start with a few that were based on the challenges that participants submitted during the registration process for this event, and then we'll move on to Q&A from the audience. So the first question we have is for BHA. How can RFSAs work with the mission and BHA to identify WASH lessons learned from previous USAID-funded investments, including closed RFSAs? And how can we work with you to really harmonize research and learning priorities with other stakeholders that are funded by USAID? And so this question really came from the challenges that participants submitted, especially noted when, there's a RFSA, it closes, there's perhaps a new implementing partner. How do we really capture those lessons learned how do we build on what we've learned from other USAID investments as well? So I'll turn it over to BHA for that question.
All right, so thank you very much for that question, and it's a relevant question. So to begin with, BHA, or I should say USAID in general, has a platform where most of the studies and other learnings are compiled. It's more of a repository. It's called Development Experience Clearing House, DEC. However, since we are now narrowing down to the mission, I think what's important is to make sure that we document all the experiences and the learning so that they can be used by the RFSA. I'll give you an example what we did here. So our regional M&D advisor based here in Malawi, but he's actually for the region, was very instrumental in terms of consolidating the learning from the previous DFAPs that we have implemented so far. And he actually drew out some of the lessons and shared with Titukulane during the R&I. And even during the TOC workshop that we happened recently, we also did a similar presentation drawing all those lessons to feed into our TOC. I think the other thing that we need to consider here is having lessons learned exercises, more like one that Titukulane planned previously, but it never happened. But these are opportunities for partners to share what they have experienced so far and the lessons from these other activities. Let me stop there for now.
Great, thanks so much for that, and a great reminder around the deck. You know, those learning exercises and really collating findings from previous evaluations as we design new interventions. I'd love to hear from other participants in the chat box. We'll also discuss this in the breakout room, but I think this is a real opportunity you know, for us to think as a collective group, how do we really document and start doing business, you know, better and based on those lessons and not, you know, recreating the wheel or making, you know, some of the same mistakes that we've done in previous projects. So thank you for kicking off this discussion. The next question is for Budi Kadidi for Rafa. Now that it has been several years since R&I, in which ways did the refinement period impact the implementation of your WASH programming? How did you really emphasize adaptive management throughout the 5 years of the project?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Nicole. Can you hear me well? Yeah.
Yes, we can hear you.
Do you hear me? Yeah. I just want to make sure I'm in the Kasai, in the province. Yes. Since 2017 or 2016 was our refine and implement, and now we are our 50 years of the program. There was the national governments also was really progressing. But let me start with the influence of the national policy and standards and guidelines. At the beginning of our program, CLTS was not the national strategy. The national strategy was the Villagical Assays. And there was a lot of negotiations at the beginning to bring this, you know, evidence-based CLTS program into the province. Was not easy. There was a lot of misunderstanding, but at the end, we were able to merge the strategy with the provincial WASH of the Ministry of Health. So we have like a merged CLTS and the Villagical Assays. But then we learn together, go to field visits, supervision together, and analyze every year as soon as we receive like a annual evaluation, but also the midterm assessment done by USAID. And we, at the end, we found out that really the two programs were working together. And right now, the national strategy is the CLTS program. So there was a lot of back and forth with the provincial, but we were able to really to share the lessons learned at the national level. It was really helpful also at the beginning because there are program villages that are receiving WASH program and are kind of really advanced in terms of knowledge at the community level. So merging, balancing, leveraging with the other WASH program was really important. So that was really great also in terms of knowing more what's going on in the field than just having the document of the proposal. So refine and implement was really helpful. And then the last point I would like to point is at the beginning, it was not really clear who is doing what in terms of water at the government. There was like 8 ministers that are in charge of WASH, of water especially. But throughout the years, the government made clearer about who is doing what, and it was more clearer. Then we could really make kind of like a bridge following that change of strategy at the national level, and disseminate those new policy, those new training, or those new guidelines from the national level to the local level, which was really helpful because now also it's bridging the understanding of what is the priority of the national level. And then also with the local state or stakeholder who is more and more engaged at the beginning, at the implementation of the program. The open defecation free village is starting to increase, and then we were moving to more capacity building of the institution, and we learned together of those institutions where we need to go further. So I think that was really helpful also in terms of really helping us where to fill the gap at the 4th year of the program. And the last point is more about even the operation of identifying and selecting the drilling company, learning together with the national hydraulic system about every time we finish an activity of selection, we do an after review meetings and see where are the gaps. And then now the provincial hydraulic company institution of the government does now have a very clear steps on how to select drilling company, what are the norms and standards, and what are the different points that needs to be strengthened in their process. So there are lots of learning and adapting when you really do a strong stakeholder analysis at the beginning of your program, and then we work with them throughout the years without working alone. So that was great. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much, Rafa. And I know you have so many years of experience of implementation now and lots of lessons that it's hard to condense in just a few minutes. I do want to flag a comment from Titikulane that what you just said really resonated with them around co-learning, negotiation, and advocacy with national and local governments around technical concepts and approaches is important and is often really a tipping point in WASH in scalability and sustainability. Some RFSAs shy away from this because there's a lot of political risk potentially. And it's often more effective or helpful to have BHA supporting and facilitating this. So I just wanted to flag, and if others have things that you heard from Rafa that you felt the same or different in your refinement year, we would love to hear that. We'll move on now to a question for Titikulane. What R&I process was most helpful for WASH, and how will you ensure continued learning and adaptation throughout implementation?
Thank you, Nicole. The first, perhaps, to actually get to talking about is the collaboration in the defining of the TOR scope of work that you're actually positioning for your study. So right from the process, from the beginning, we had to actually engage the key stakeholders from the government to local level as well as national level to really to define what is the scope of the study, what is it that we seek to actually uncover with this particular study. And in that, we were very clear in terms of what are the specific parameters that we will be assessing. So issues of whether you're looking for technological, social, cultural, governance, and economical issues, we just had to agree in terms of these are the key parameters that we have to get into assessing for us to get into a study report that will be informing what we need to fix within the water supply chain. So that's the first bit which we could actually refer to in terms of the first step and the first process in the R&I that related to water supply. Secondly is the actual engagement of the consultant. More often, we error in terms of who do we actually get into the study to actually help us with unpacking the learning that we want. For us, I think we had at the heart of the programming and the plan that we needed to have a consultant who had understood the background of the WASH sector in the country and as well as the district. So getting to base flow that we worked with, I'm hoping they are here. We had understood that they had quite good ground in terms of the context in which the study was actually planned for. They are the guys who understood exactly the water sector, the issues of functionality of water points across, and for goodness sake, they had actually worked on a similar kind of research before. So we actually took advantage of that in terms of, I think this is the consultant that would actually help us deliver. They have the capacity, they have the understanding, they have got the tools to work with to make sure that we get out the data and report that will be informing our WASH programming into planning. That aside, we had also looked at, yes, they may have the capacity, they may have the understanding, but we needed to have the WASH leads accompany them in terms of getting to the ground and capture the correct data and working with them through and through in terms of really packaging the data.
To have lost Gift. Not sure if it's just from my end.
Yes, did we lose you?
Yeah, I think we might have lost him. Kyla or Peter, do you want to wrap up the question?
Yeah, thanks, Nicole. I think Gift did touch on the key aspects, but maybe what I could add is to say, working along with the consultant, basically teamwork, I think also helped to really tease out the key gaps and also the focus that Gift did mention. I think that's what I could add, but I think otherwise Gift had covered it all. From the terms of reference, getting the right consultant to also working along together with the rest of the team. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much, Peter. Moving on now, we have a question for Maharo. Recognizing that you undertook your refinement year during major shocks, including COVID-19 and food insecurity, what recommendations do you have for partners on adaptive management?
Okay, thank you, Nicole. First, Maharu had several questions based on the community's motivation in the research during the pilot activity, CLTS. So these questions concern what are the motivation and capacity of communities to practice and adopt the WASH behavior, and what is the implication of the crisis and the shock on the motivation of this community to adopt a WASH behavior, and how does community exploit and use local material to build latrines. So according to us, for the next future studies or research about WASH, it will be better to make an SPC approach per year to analyze barriers also with an institutional, technical, and social implication to better understand the context. And then really start at the beginning, the integration of economic analysis household to evaluate the feasibility of the willingness to pay the water services or other WASH services. So the next is to seek in design even before implementation integration the private sector in the context where governments are not too motivated to invest on WASH activities such as in Madagascar. The involvement of the commitment of the government is so poor that we need to be strengthened. And the last is it is necessary to consider the integration of WASH with the environmental plan with the local, and especially for the integration of water watershed management. So I think that's all. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Sanjara.
I don't know if Clara has an addition.
Yeah,
Thank
go
you.
ahead, Cara.
Oh, no, I think that's all. I just wanted to reinforce Anzana's point about lessons learned and why pilot implementation was so important, given the emergency and the crisis context where we operate in the southern part of Madagascar. It's critical to do pilots and test and see how things work, because doing more long-term research that takes several months didn't just respond to the timing that we were facing and the context on the ground. So that's what I'd like to add. Thank you. Over.
Great, thanks so much, Cara and Anjara. We'll move back to a question for BHA, and this one I'll ask Precious to respond to. One challenge that was identified by many of the participants who registered for this event is the balance between trying to design and complete WASH studies within a 12-month refine period, while needing to get USAID approval on scopes of work, consultants, and reports. Are there any recommendations or guidelines that you can share with RFSAs or that they can use when designing WASH scopes of work and submitting reports to really facilitate the review and approval timeline?
Yeah, thank you, everyone. And just wanted to reiterate that the R&I period is not a full-fledged research period. It is a refinement to contextualize existing research, to fill a gap in unknowns about WASH behaviors for the specific community. So we need to take what we know from an already evidence-based theory of change and contextualize the pathway to specific targets and communities. So the idea of, having specific guidance towards designing the WASH scope of work and reports to facilitate the review and approval process, it's a great idea because it does help streamline the R&I process, but we have to be mindful that each RFSA is unique in that some RFSAs may strongly prioritize WASH as a need and some may not. They may just focus on SBC or integrate that SBC WASH SBC component into its nutrition outcomes. So creating some form of a global WASH guidance or tool may obligate other RFSAs who might not have WASH as a priority area. So I would suggest that I think ProWASH is here as a conduit to support all the RFSAs. So the idea of having that constructing a WASH R&I toolkit is a great idea because the partners can be able to take that and contextualize that. It's a little bit difficult to be able to provide tools and guidance at a BHA level because that, as I said, that might obligate other partners that may not have a large WASH component. And then another thing just to stress is that understanding that BHA does have WASH advisors. I am, for example, the WASH POC for southern parts of Southern Africa, as well as West Africa and then Central Africa. So it's really, really important to tap into building that relationship and developing relationship with the WASH advisors at the DC level and also at the mission, if there is a WASH advisor at the mission. And so including them, during the R&I process, including them during every stage of what you're doing, so that when you come to the point of getting an approval is quick and easy. So I think building that relationship with the WASH advisors is important. And I mean, that's something that I would strongly stress on that.
Great, thank you so much, Precious. Those are really helpful tips for partners to help overcome these challenges, and also good suggestions for ProWASH as well.
Nicole, just one thing to add on the toolkit. I think just noting that even though ProWASH might be facilitating the toolkit process, we as a BHA can still be part in participating and helping through the process of developing it, but not necessarily having BHA own the process.
Okay, that's a great point. Thank you. And I saw earlier there was a question for ProWASH and BHA around possibly having a platform that could serve as a repository for the WASH R&I reporting and tools. It sounds like that might be something that we could explore with the Food Security and Nutrition Network, but also could look with our colleagues at IDEAL and PCS to see if there's potential interest on collaborating, because I think, or this might be of something that would be of interest not just to WASH practitioners, but R&I more broadly, especially as we see that some studies, such WASH is often found in other studies as well, right? It might be in the markets, it might be in SBC. So perhaps that's something we can explore with the other food security support mechanisms as well. So we have about 10 minutes left for questions from the audience. I see a number of you dropped questions already in the chat box, so I'm going to go ahead and look at some of these. I think, Rafa, one question that is coming from Yosef in Ethiopia. Ethiopia is in refinement right now. They ask, does your sustainability plan include a separate plan for implementing all WASH activities? Which elements are core in the plan, the infrastructure design issues or governance?
Yeah, and then already answered, Yosef. We have an overall sustainability plan for the overall governance of the program. But we have some specific aspect where, for example, for the WASH behavior change, it is more linked to the nutrition and health sustainability plan. And for the marketing-based service, it's in the overall value chain and business service provider sustainability plan. But we realized that we in the beginning, it was more WASH, but then now, as we are ending, we found that the governance, all this question around accountability, around social cohesion, these are core to the sustainability plan and the engagement of the different state actors.
Okay, great. Thanks for that clarification. Let's see, we have a few other questions that were responded in the chat around the sanitation marketing activities. I just want to note that I know there's a number of RFSAs on the line from Ethiopia, from Mali, who are in refinement or who have just recently finished refinement and who are really interested in exploring market-based sanitation activities. We have Budi Kadidi and the 3 Niger RFSAs and Vimplus in Burkina Faso, who have been piloting market-based sanitation activities already for a number of years. So it's a great opportunity, and we can help facilitate the connections to learn from their pilots to see if there's any recommendations or suggestions that they have as well as you start to design those types of sanitation activities. I see another question in the chat box here, or comment from Cara on urging BHA to consider these in emergency contexts as well. They're doing SBC in WASH in emergency context, so it's short-term, but also long-term outcomes as well. So I think this is a theme that we will be discussing as well throughout the breakout rooms. Many of the resilience food security activities are working in very fragile contexts, food insecurity, and moving sometimes between that emergency and development activities. I think all of us have been tested even more with newer shocks such as COVID-19, but that, you know, the shocks that you faced through food insecurity, other disease outbreaks and so forth have also affected refinement year implementation and that need for adaptive management. So we have another question here on Titukulane around multi-village rural water utility management systems. I know you responded in the chat, but just wanted to see, Titukulane, if you want to expand on those learnings and on the piloting around multi-village rural water utility management systems.
Right, Nicole, I think at the moment, what we are doing at Titukulane is really working with the government guideline on how do you manage water supply systems in the rural setting. And that guideline has quite key issues that govern how you actually conduct business there. So that's the only piece of work that we are looking at. But what we have done is to really look at it again and influence the review of that guideline, because we noted that there are some gaps in that guideline, including, of course, issues of the setting of the tariffs and how the capacity building will be offered to the water point committees. The finding that I just referred to earlier on noted that there are serious gaps in there. Most of the times, the tariff setting is not informed by correct life cycle cost analysis. So most of the times that the water point committees will fix what they think is going to give them the correct fund that can help them with the operational maintenance. We found that that perhaps is lacking, is actually wanting, and we have actually influenced the district government to make sure that we start reviewing the community-based management model. At the moment, we have also influenced national government to try to take it up, that they influence that at national level. So the Ministry of Water and Sanitation has taken that task, and they're actually mobilizing other WASH stakeholders nationally to try to address the gaps that we have actually seen in that policy guideline that governs water supply system management. So we are confident that perhaps in the 2 years to come, we should be looking at a process that refines the community-based management model to include some of the key findings that we actually found from Titukulane, and we have made recommendation to government in terms of how we want those positioned within the government guideline to actually make sure that we rectify some of the issues that we talked about earlier on in my presentation. I have got my colleague Peter and Kaira. They have been very key in supporting the influencing at government level to make sure that the document gets refined. So Peter can talk to the national effort that has happened this far. Over to you, Peter.
Yeah, thanks, Gift. Just to agree with the point that Gift raised with regards to influencing the national review of the community-based management model, which is the predominant one at the moment. Having looked at the gaps that are there, so happy to report that we have the Ministry of Water and Sanitation really taking a leading role together with WASH partners to review, look at the context, and find a way of tilting it towards professionalized management kind of model. So that's the bit that the project has also been able to influence with regards to the national level consultations. But just to pick on the point that Joseph raised with regards to multi-village, I think the possibility of introducing reticulated water supply systems provides an opportunity where you can cluster a number of villages and look at a model that cuts across a number of villages, more or less a model like the Water User Association. But happy to hear also from Joseph his experience in the area where he's working. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much, Peter and Gift, for that. And I think definitely there's an opportunity to continue that conversation as well. in the breakout rooms or even follow up for additional learning. So we've come to the end of our panel discussion. We are going to take a short break, but when you come back from break, you will be assigned to a breakout room automatically. During the first breakout room, you will be discussing some of the major challenges that participants reported facing during the refinement year when it comes to WASH studies and processes. During registration, we asked you, what is your biggest challenge when it comes to R&I for WASH? And we want to take some time in this first breakout room to discuss those challenges, but also, what are some ways that we can overcome those challenges and what sort of support you might need from your peers, from colleagues, from ProWASH, from BHA to help overcome these challenges. We will be capturing all of this in a shared Google document, and we will be writing up a summary document afterwards. And that will also help us brainstorm some future ideas for collaboration. What I'm hearing so far might be an R&I toolkit for WASH. I'm also hearing, though, that there's a lot of interest in diving deeper into having specific conversations around, for example, governance during the refinement period, water governance, engagement with government officials. I'm also hearing a lot of interest around market approaches, adaptive learning. So we might also want to consider, having some smaller peer-to-peer learning online, some smaller discussion groups where we can really dive deeper into these different topics. But all of that is, to be decided with you. This is meant to be very collaborative, and we're interested in hearing what would be most useful to you. So we will now take a break for 7 minutes. Yeah, so take about a 7-minute break. Julia will play some music, and when you come back, please be ready to jump into your breakout room on WASH R&I methods and approaches. And just to note that we have a English breakout rooms and a French breakout room. Great, hi everyone, and welcome back. You will need to click interpretation again. Si vous venez de nous rejoindre dans la grande salle, vous allez choisir encore interprétation dans votre barre des outils Zoom. Donc, il faut choisir encore anglais ou français. So since we're coming back to the main breakout room, you're going to go ahead and select either French or English again for the last part of our session. So thanks everyone for joining. We will be sharing a summary of the notes from the discussion with the participants, and we're really focusing on, what do we do next and where would you like to go with this information? So in the last part of this knowledge sharing event, we are going to go back to our panelists and we are going to ask them to share some final reflections on this question. If we were to fast forward 5 years from now, how do we see WASH work under the RFSAs changing or being adapted as a result of R&I and the learning we are doing now? Thinking about, 5 years from now, what are some viable scaling strategies for WASH and the RFSAs, and what needs to happen for these changes to occur? So we're going to go back to our panelists from Titukulane, Maharo, Budikadidi, and USAID. Starting with Titukulane, thinking about 5 years from now, how would you like to see WASH work changing or being adapted, and what are some viable strategies for getting to that point?
Thank you, Nicole. Maybe the first is to indicate that we'll need some structural changes in terms of the vetting of the TORs to make sure that we have got quality TORs with correct research questions that can inform the correct kind of data and, of course, the recommendations from the studies. We need to actually get seriously thinking about how do we get to refine and streamline those kind of reports to inform the WASH programming, particularly during the examination process. I think what we usually miss is sometimes the studies come in clean, but sometimes we have not had the thought process to actually look at what is this recommendation, what is the implication on the program design. So that we need to seriously think about. Over and above getting a quality report, the key to WASH programming should be how well do we really use that information and streamline the recommendations to inform quality programming for WASH in the RFSAs. We'll need to be a little more flexible in terms of allowing the research studies to innovate as opposed to really asking the usual questions and capturing the same kind of data, and you end up repeating the same kind of research again and again. We can make a reference to what others have done before and only actually ask those kind of questions that we feel are context specific and will generate information that will be useful for our RFSA and for our WASH component. In that regard, we'll need to get into perhaps creating a repository specifically for WASH studies so that one can make a reference to this is what was done already. How do I actually make sure that I ask the quality questions to get information that will actually give me a different result from where others are? We may, in that particular kind of repository, position some tools and guidelines in terms of the how to do the WASH RFSAs, or sorry, the WASH studies, if you are to get the quality kind of report to inform your WASH programming. I think for me, those are the key texts my colleagues would actually ask in terms of what more would we want to look for. I think we are wanting to make sure that in all cases, we avoid repeating the research studies that will give you the obvious things that others had actually studied on before, and they only are using information and resources and money and wasting the resource for nothing. So we would want to make sure that in moving forward, we can learn from what others do and position ourselves differently, ask different questions, and generate knowledge that can refine the WASH programming better moving forward. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Gift. Rafa, over to you for Budi Kadidi and your thoughts on the next 5 years in terms of WASH within RFSAs.
Yeah, we are closing our program, so I don't know where we will be in the next 5 years. However, I think we were really totally wrong at the beginning, thinking that WASH is mostly behavior change. It's more than that. It's more systems and the stakeholders analysis, and with whom you need to be working with, you need to be patient, and you need to really work. And there are bigger concepts in WASH that needs really to be assessed at the beginning, like the governance, the accountability, the social cohesion, and even the environmental change, and all of this natural resource management change. So these are big questions that needs to be thought before really starting a WASH program. And another aspect is also when you're thinking of, there are different practices that are more there are different practices that are needed some money or some resources from households to be adopted and to be maintained. So the need to really assess also those ability, willingness to pay, understanding more business in terms of WASH. And then the last point I really try to insist is, if there are past RFSA in a country or in a region, repository of information about even past borehole drilling, all the data around the water resources, around the different activity that's been done, lessons learned, needs to be really available for the next RFSA that is coming on board. Because behavior change and water services really changing and needs to adapt every time, but we need to learn really from past experience. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much, Rafa. And that's definitely a theme that we've heard throughout the different breakout rooms, is really leveraging institutional knowledge, staff knowledge, but making sure that there is a way to access information and data afterwards. And I think we've also heard throughout many of the breakout rooms and conversations around the political aspects, the governance aspects, stakeholder engagement that really influence, how RFSA activities are carried out, and how, how we're engaging with private sector and government actors as well. So thank you for those points. Over to you, Anjara. Thinking about how you'd like to see WASH activities changing or being adapted as a result of this refinement period.
Okay, thanks, Nicole. In 5 years, I really hope that all municipalities will have the capacity to provide the functional, accessible, and inclusive and sustainable WASH services to the population. So, what need to happen to this change? So, the first one is the institution take their roles and their responsibilities in WASH sector, and will define the national policy and strategy adopted by all WASH sector must be set up. And then allocation for budget for WASH activities for the ministry, for the commune, the municipality. And then national and regional and communal planning and coordination and harmonization must be put in place to give access to WASH services to all the population. So for that, monitoring indicators are established and shared with all WASH stakeholders to the monitoring activities. And the next is the a platform of learning must be set up to the to share what approach and what practice should we have to abandon, or what practice to be promoted. So and the next, the WASH technician must be set up and operational at the level of the commune to ensure the all WASH activities in the commune. So it is necessary to ensure the availability of qualified local technician, the spare part supply chain, a continuous participation of the community, of course, on the WASH of the WASH services, like the workers' water, the payment of services, and the last one is the integration of the protection of water resource that we discussed during the breakout on this session. So that's all. Thanks a lot.
Great, thank you, Anjara, and great points around adapting, learning, budgeting, and really, taking into account those learnings throughout the project. For our last panelist, Precious, same question. Would love to hear from you. How would you like to see the WASH work under RFSAs changing or being adapted as a result of refinement and the learnings we're doing now?
Yes, thank you, Nicole. I just want to say that BHA will always follow just the evolving global trends. This is the direction that we're going, especially being able to kind of have a posture of listening and learning from partners, because that's where we can be able to identify some of these prioritized areas for research and for adaptive management. So just really stressing that and looking at those global trends. We are, this is just kind of at a very high level looking at this, but nothing concrete. But like I said, we look to partners to better inform us. But I would say that there's going to be more emphasis, and especially with the result of growing infectious diseases, we will have a strong emphasis on strengthening and pivoting for social behavior change in WASH. And also now that we have a new USAID climate strategy, so we want to kind of improve on the adaptive management for for climate and for water resilience, so looking at climate adaptation. And then also the strong emphasis on local solutions, and a lot of people have been mentioning the idea of focusing on local solutions. That's really important for WASH service delivery and putting emphasis on that and on localization. So we would like to see more of that. And I would say what needs to happen on our side, we want to be continually working with ProWASH to create a stronger repository that can be able to assist partners. And then also being better informed, like I said earlier, for BHA advisors, kind of being, how can we be more engaged through the process, whether it's the RNI process or the implementation process, how can we be better engaged? And I think we want to hear from partners on that to ensure that the WASH advisors, whether at the DC level or within the mission, we can be better engaged because that can help to kind of smooth out the process as well as streamline processes and also be able to quickly move through an approval process. So, so being better engaged is one area. And then the idea of the continuous learning is really important, both at the country and the global level. So, I mean, this is a perfect example of having that continuous learning and going through very much discussing thematic challenges, also looking at WASH themes that we can have pause and reflect sessions on, and having both BHA and partners coming together to look through that. I think that's really, really important. And then I would just go back again and just stress the idea of scaling up local capacity building and local solutions. So really, when we're doing R&I or doing any gap research, we need to really strengthen that area. So that's all I have to say. And I really appreciate being a part of this. And I know that there has been several BHA colleagues that have been on this call as well, in and out. And so we look forward to taking up all of this feedback and being able to work with ProWASH to better strengthen the R&I process. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Precious, and great points around the repository, on learning, on pause and reflect sessions, implementation process, you know, scaling up local capacity building, taking note of all of these. And I've also put in the chat box the question that you've put back to partners on how can the BHA WASH advisors be better engaged with the RFSAs? I'd encourage partners to drop in thoughts or to drop them into the Google document so that we can capture this. Thank you so much to all of our panelists. Really appreciate the time that you put into preparing for this event and being part of today's event. Before we close, we'd also like to hear from participants via this poll on what engagement and collaboration you are interested in participating in the future. We would also like to capture, you know, your ideas. You can also put them in the chat box and let us know, you know, are you interested in peer-to-peer online discussions on WASH, WASH learning documents or case studies, sharing WASH scopes of work or terms of references from your studies, collaborating on a WASH R&I toolbox, or other ideas that you have. We are really looking to you as, you know, we'd like to hear kind of your thoughts, your ideas, and where do we go from here? Great, I'm seeing some ideas being dropped in the chat box. It would be great to set up at least annually, country level or regional WASH exchange with BHA WASH advisors. I see here another suggestion around thinking about incentive structures that reduce partner anxiety around research and instead incentivize practical learning and learning uptake and application. Let's see, we're seeing, yeah, lots of interest across all these different topics. I see here exchange visit to another RFSA. More pause and reflect webinar on theme specific areas such as sustainability. We'll give it another minute for you to complete the poll before you sign off, and we'll share out all of the results. But again, just really want to thank USAID, Maharo, Budi Kadidi, Titikulane, our colleagues at PCS, Julia and Kayla, for supporting us today. Thank you also to all the facilitators and the note takers in the breakout room. And thanks everyone for taking time to attend today's event and share out your experiences. It was good to hear from, Ethiopia, Mali, Zimbabwe, all of the different countries that are in RNI or that are in the refinement year or who have completed it. And I think we've identified a lot of different ways for supporting kind of more sharing of lessons learned and best practices. I'm seeing in the chat box possibly thematic working groups like MUSE, like tariff structures, like market-based sanitation. Feels like we really just touched the edge of the iceberg today by discussing some of those different challenges. So great, thanks everyone, and looking forward to staying in touch on this topic.